Some of you may know that I have a family that just loves getting out on the water, and they love boats. And over the years, our families have had lots of boats. We've had kayaks, canoes, sailing boats, a catamaran, a sailing dinghy, I should say, a catamaran, and now a powerboat. So needless to say, I have quite a few stories to tell about adventures and misadventures on the water. After a few misadventures on the water, Peter would often say, "When disaster happens, adventure begins." I beg to differ with that comment. Funny enough, when disaster does strike, it is always remembered. This morning we're going to remember some of the great stories of the Bible through boats. And I'll tell you some of my boating stories, and we're going to look at the lessons that they can teach us. I can see you all thinking about, there are a few boats in the Bible. Going through them, it was quite interesting. There's quite a lot of them. So the first one, the obvious one, is Noah's Ark. And the lesson from that is that his commitment to God, it never wavered. So let's read from Genesis 5, from the Message. "I'm going to bring a flood on the earth that will destroy everything alive under heaven. Total destruction. But I'm going to establish a covenant with you. You'll board the ship, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives will come on board with you. You're also to take 2 of each living creature, a male and a female, on board the ship to preserve their lives with you. 2 of every species of bird, mammal and reptile. 2 of everything so as to preserve their lives among with yours. Also, get all the food you'll need and store it up for you and them." And Noah did everything God commanded him to do. Peter has a good friend, Gary, who actually went to Kenmore High with, and he lives at River Hills. Now, both he and Peter, they've done many sailing adventures together over the years. He's owned many sailing boats, some really quite lovely ones. But his dream was always to build a trimaran. Starting from scratch, and I mean from scratch, having the plans and nothing else, he built this beautiful trimaran over 13 years in his shed in the backyard, just down the road from the Moores, and used to be the Bordens, in the backyard there. He painstakingly crafted it bit by bit. And through blood, sweat, and I'm sure sometimes tears, he was committed to finishing the task. And this commitment did cost him dearly. It took a lot of money. It took a lot of time away from his family. Actually, when the floods came in 2011, who would have thought that a boat in the backyard at River Hills would be under threat of floating away when he was quite a long way away from the river? Well, it nearly did. He actually, because he'd worked on it for so long, he actually tethered it to the top of his back veranda. And when the floods, it floated out of his shed and up. He put out of the shed, up, and tethered it to the veranda. And as the flood waters rose, he stayed awake all night, holding on to his precious boat. Actually, he rang the ABC when they did the whole 20, days and days of reporting on the floods. He's the one that rang up at about 3 a.m. and said, "Right, the waters are falling now." And they said, "Well, how do you know that?" And he said, "Well, I'm actually holding on to my boat and I can see it. The waters were dropping." So he had a boat floating off the back of his veranda. So we do admire his commitment to finishing the project, and it was certainly an amazing feat. And we probably know of a lot of people that have started huge projects like that, and not many of them actually finish them. But fortunately, we have had the wonderful pleasure of being able to enjoy sailing on this boat. Think about Noah. When God spoke to him about building an ark, It actually had never rained on the earth before. People ridiculed him and they thought he was crazy. It took years and years to build the ark, but Noah kept working and working at what God told him to do. He didn't let people's criticism or unbelief change his steadfast commitment to God, and the day came when he and his family were saved from the flood. The scriptures encourage us to hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. Because God knows that we will face a lot of opportunities and reasons to give up our commitment to believing his promises. People will criticise you. They won't understand what God has spoken to you. And by their words and actions, they will try and convince you to give up. Time passes and you wonder, God, did you really speak to me? Should I let it go? And no matter what opposition you face, hold fast to your commitment to God. It's up to you and me to declare God's goodness, to hold fast to his promises, and to not pay attention to the critics and all the things that come against us. We just need to keep marching on with God because he is faithful and he will bring it to pass. And remember, every time you say yes to God, you're one step closer to the next place that God has for you, and you will be a shining light to all those around you. The next lesson we're going to be looking at is from Jonah. And the lesson there is that you can't run from God. And the scripture's from Jonah 1. One day, long ago, God's word came to Jonah. Up on your feet and on your way to the big city of Nineveh. Preach to them. They're in a bad way and I can't ignore it any longer. But Jonah got up and he went in the other direction to Tarshish. Tarshish. Don't you love that word? Tarshish. Running away from God. Okay, so at one stage we had an 18-foot catamaran. We had it for many years and we were sailing it one day on Lake Catharaba. There it is. There she is, our little catamaran. Well, actually it was a little bit bigger than some of them, pretty tiny, but that was good. There was a great wind and Peter and I were sailing out quite a little bit offshore, quite a long way. It's a brackish lake just behind Noosa, and it's quite a big lake, so way over the other side. The wind came up, and those of you that know about boats, if the wind's a certain, as long as it's not too windy, you can go up on one hole. So here we were holding tight, and it's quite thrilling actually being on a sailing boat, a catamaran, when you're holding on and you're up on one hole. So here we are sailing along, and then suddenly over goes the boat. We're just thrown away and so left in the murky water, the boat upturned, and we're a long way offshore. Peter managed somehow to get it back up, at least the right way, but it discovered that the stay, which was a thing that held up the main sail, had snapped, leaving us with no mast or sails. Now, the wind was pretty strong, and sometimes I think I can be a little bit clever. I thought, well, I could be a human mast, can't I? I can stand there, hold up the sail, Peter could steer, and see how we go. Anyway, the wind was behind us, and I stood there holding the sail. The wind actually was in a good direction, and we actually sailed it all the way back to our campsite without even having to paddle or swim. And so we got there safely. Even though it was a mishap, we had the wind and we got to shore safely. God told Jonah to go to the city of Nineveh. He had clear instructions where to go. He knew exactly what he was supposed to do. But Jonah, he didn't want to go to Nineveh. Instead, he did go in the opposite direction. God said, "Go left," and he went right. You would think God would say, "All right, Jonah, you're on your own. I'll go before you if you go to Nineveh, but good luck if you go the other way." Jonah got on a boat and he headed in the wrong direction, and a huge storm arose. Yes, there are consequences for going the wrong way, but that doesn't mean God won't help you. He's going to give you another chance and another chance and another. The boat Jonah was in was about to capsize. The sailors were all about to die. Jonah finally admitted that he was the cause of the storm. The sailors didn't think twice. What did they do to him? Threw him overboard. And so here was Jonah out in the middle of the ocean in a huge storm. No life jacket, no EPIRB, and no chance of survival. And this should have been really the end for Jonah. But God doesn't abandon us when we make mistakes. God has already gone before us, and he went before Jonah, who was going in the wrong direction. He ordained for that big fish to swallow him up and spare his life. Like Jonah, many of us would not be here if God had not gone before us when we were headed in the wrong direction. And with Emmaus, we have a special talk called Prevenient Grace. I always remember the one that Judy gave to us about prevenient grace, grace that goes before us. We brought trouble on ourselves. It was nobody's fault except our own, but God in his mercy was there going before us to help get us out of it. I want you to have this assurance that you're not doing life by yourself. The creator of the universe is going before you. He has you covered. You can lie down at night in peace, not just when you do everything right, but even when you make mistakes. You may think that you've blown it too many times or you've got too far off course, but God isn't finished with you. You can try to outrun God, but you'll never be successful. God knows your next move. When you show up, he'll be there. He's not here to condemn you, but to help restore you and give you another chance. Jonah got back on course and went to Nineveh just as God asked him. And today, if you're off course, God too can help you get back on course because he has a perfect plan for your life. In Isaiah 48 it says, "I am the Lord your God who teaches you what is best for you, who directs you in the way you should go." Amen. Our next boating story is a fishing story. John 21 says, "They went out, got in the boat. They caught nothing that night. When the sun came up, Jesus was standing on the beach, but they didn't recognise him. And Jesus spoke to them, 'Good morning, did you catch anything for breakfast?' They said, 'Nope.' And he said, 'Throw the nets off the right side of the boat and see what happens.' They actually did what he said. And all of a sudden there were so many fish in it, they weren't strong enough to pull it in. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, 'Hey, it's the Master.'" Every year during winter, when our kids were growing up, we would go to our uncle's holiday home on Facing Island, which is a lovely little island off Gladstone. And we would fish for winter whiting, And we used to spend hours going around the island. It's only a fairly small island, just looking for that magic fishing spot, trying to catch the fish. We'd enjoy the sunshine, and we had lots of wonderful family memories catching the fish there. Sometimes the boys used to think they were pretty clever, and they would go up the beach and find these holes, fishing holes, and they'd be trying to fish. And then Eloise and I would show up. Here's a photo of Eloise when she was 5. And we bought her a very expensive rod from Kmart. And she would cast this little net, this fishing rod, out by herself. And I remember particularly one season she actually caught more fish than all of us. Where everyone thought they were clever, but little Eloise would just cast. Because she didn't cast very far, there must have been a gutter, and in came all the fish. The boys couldn't believe it, that Eloise could outfish them. And to this day, she still does. Now, if I actually told you that Eloise caught a fish this big recently, you wouldn't believe me, would you? But there it is. There's Eloise's big fish. She still fishes to this day. One time, Jesus was on the beach, and he saw the group of fishermen putting away their empty fishing nets. They'd been out all night. Jesus walked over to them and asked if he could borrow their boat, and he could push away from the shore and teach a large crowd of people that gathered. Jesus had never met these fishermen before, but they allowed him to borrow the boat. And when he was finished, as a way to thank them, Jesus told them to launch the boat out into the deep and that they'd catch a great number of fish. Now, if you really think about it, these guys thought that they were pros. And then suddenly this guy just rocks up to the beach and tells them, go out fishing. They probably thought, this man's a teacher. We're pretty good. We know all about fishing. And then suddenly he's telling us how to fish? I don't think so. Doesn't he know how we make our living? We've been doing this for years and years. We're experts in our field, and we know where the fish are biting and when they aren't. And now is not the right time to fish. Do you realise that sometimes we can know too much? Sometimes our own intellect can keep us from God's heart. If you listen to some of the experts in the economy long enough, they'll talk you into going under. You hear of the housing crisis, it's busting. Super's going down. They'll talk you into a defeated life. Some medical reports will talk you into staying sick. Some news report will keep you from pursuing your dreams. I know it's always good to have information and understanding things, but I'm not saying let's hide our heads in the sand. And at some point, you've got to get out of the natural and say, this may be impossible with God, with man, but I know with God all things are possible. At some point, you've got to say to yourself, I'm not going to let my circumstances direct me. I'm not going to allow any more doubts and unbelief to come to my mind. Yes, I want to know the facts, but the truth of God's word is what stands forever. The fishermen finally said to Jesus, as politely as they could, Sir, we've been fishing all night. We didn't catch anything. We're very knowledgeable. We're very experienced, and this is not our first time out. We appreciate your advice. We appreciate your suggestion, but we're really tired. We need to get home, get some rest, and it's not the time to fish. And Jesus said, listen, men, this may not make sense to you. You may not understand it. You may not understand what I'm talking about. When I say there's fish out there, it may defy the odds. It may seem like a waste of your time, but you've got to realise I control the fish. There may not have been fish out there last night, but I can assure you there are fish there right now. And they thought, okay, off we go. Nevertheless, your word, we will do it. And that's the attitude we've got to take, regardless of what we've been told. Sometimes we've just got to jump in, don't we? This doesn't make sense for us to sometimes for us to believe, and it doesn't make sense for us to get our hopes up sometimes. Nevertheless, if God says so, we should believe it. Those men did go out, and we know the rest of the story. Their nets began to break. When they stepped out, they obeyed him in faith. He did exceedingly above what they could ever imagine. They just didn't catch a few fish, did they? To think they caught so many fish that the nets broke. And it's just stepping out in faith and believing in the unseen. Our final story is probably my favourite, and that's Jesus calming the storm. So we're reading from Luke. One day he and his disciples got in a boat. "Let's cross the lake," he said. Off they went. It was smooth sailing and he fell asleep. A terrific storm came up suddenly on the lake. Water poured in and they were about to capsize. They woke Jesus and said, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." Getting to his feet, he told the wind, "Silence." And he told the waves, "Quiet down." And they did it. And the lake became smooth as glass. In the early 90s, we went boating on Moreton Bay. We had our little baby Joel and our friends from Nigeria. So our friends from Nigeria couldn't swim, neither could our baby Joel. But we had an idyllic day on the calm waters of Peel Island. Swimming, we had a lovely picnic with our overseas visitors. Now, in Queensland, of course, we get storms and they come over fast. Remember last week, I think the storm came over in 1 hour. Back then, we couldn't check the bomb, but we could see one brewing in the distance, so we thought it was time to go. We packed everything up, put everything in the boat, and as Peter got in and just about to start the engine, our friend Yinka decided it might be a good time to just catch a fish. He was determined to catch a fish. The boat started, he threw the line off over the side, and of course all the fishing line got wound around the propeller. Great. Fortunately, it was shallow enough, and after probably about half an hour, Peter managed to cut the line free from the propeller. But in that time, of course, the clouds began to brew and the weather was turning terribly nasty. Okay, so off we went. We were praying and praying that we'd get home okay. But of course, with the storm, some people here have been on Moreton Bay. When the storms, it can go from being smooth to waves and wind and a bit of a washing machine. Then the storm hit us head on. And we were getting saturated in the boat. And again, we thought, oh my goodness me, we have people here that can't swim. We're bobbing around the bay, and then it got worse. The steering in the boat actually broke. So then we're in the halfway over from Peel Island to Cleveland Point, the steering broke. So then we had to steer the boat by me holding the throttle and Peter having his whole arms around the engine of the boat, steering it. Oh dear. But we prayed and prayed, and God watched over us, and again, safely, we managed to get to the shores of Cleveland. It really could have been a disaster in the bay, and to this day we thank the Lord that we all survived. There's a story in the Bible about a time when Jesus and the disciples, that they were ministering, and when the evening came, Jesus decided to get in a boat and head over to the other shore. The disciples went with him, and while they were out, there was the huge storm, and water started coming into the boat. Isn't life like that sometimes? You're going along, smooth sailing, everything's going well. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a storm comes. Something unexpected and something all-consuming. The Bible tells us that the disciples were afraid. But Jesus was asleep through all of this. And when they woke up, Jesus said to them, "Why are you afraid?" Well, of course, here they were in a little boat. It's windy, it's raining. They certainly didn't make boats like they do now. The waves were crashing. The boat was probably swaying all over the place. Water was coming in. Now, they're fishermen. They've probably seen loads of storms before, so this one must have been particularly bad. And they were obviously very afraid. And so obviously the storm would have been a doozy. I can imagine one of them saying, "Are you kidding? Look what's going on." And Jesus was asleep. Jesus got up. We know the story. He rebuked the wind and the waves, saying, "Peace, be still." Don't you love that? Peace, be still. And the winds and the waves were calm. Not only is this an amazing picture of the power Jesus has over nature, but he also shows his amazing grace and love for us. Most people notice that Jesus questioned the disciples' doubt and fear, but in spite of their fear, he still calmed the storm. This tells me that Jesus doesn't expect us to be perfect all the time, but he does expect us to call on him. He does expect us to wake him up in the middle of our strife and our storms. And he uses the storms as teachable moments. He doesn't want us to call on him in fear. He wants us to call on him in faith. We've nothing to fear when Jesus is in the boat. We have to remember that even though there are storms in life, Jesus wants to take us through in peace and bring us out more alive and more powerful than ever before. When you face the storms, remember, Jesus is in your boat. Call on him. Jesus never said to the disciples, "Why are you waking me up?" Don't wake me up in fear. Wake me up in faith. Call on Jesus, the Prince of Peace, and let him bring peace into the storms of your life. In John 16 it says, "These things I've spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." Today, are you considering your circumstances? Or are you considering God? Are you fully persuaded that God is going to do what he promised? Or have you talked yourself out of it? It's easy to think that your dream's too big, your problem is far too great for God to care about. But remember, we serve a supernatural God. Keep believing, keep moving forward, keep obeying his word, because he is faithful. If he said it, he will do it. Let your faith connect with his power and watch him do extraordinary things in your life. So today I've been talking about boats But the boat actually represents a journey. It's a crossing, an adventure, exploration. And crossing the sea can be viewed as being symbolic of making a journey across life. Therefore, a boat can be seen as that which enables us to make such a journey in faith. I've spoken about the lessons we can learn from the boating stories about our commitment that should be unwavering to God. And you can't run from God. He surprises us in many different ways, but through it all, he can only bring us true peace. All of these people, Noah, Jonah, Peter and the disciples, they chose to trust God regardless of their circumstances. Are you going to get in the boat with Jesus? Are you going to trust God with your whole life? Adventure actually begins when we do life with Jesus. Whatever kind of storm you're facing, Jesus is in your boat. I want you to remember that. He's with you. He is in your boat. And all you've got to do is quit paddling, quit worrying and looking at the obstacles. Instead, look to him. Lean on him. He'll never let you down and he'll never stop helping you, no matter how many of those nasty storms come your way. It's time for you to sit back. It's time for you to enjoy the ride. So let's pray. Father God, we just want to give to you now those things, those storms. They come in all sorts of shapes and forms. Lord, we just want to bundle them up now. Just visualise putting them in a net and tying the top really tight, those things that trouble us. And we want to just take them out into the farthest sea and drop them in the bottom of the ocean. Lord, we want our boat to just be filled with you and filled with your glory. Thank you for sending Jesus. And teach us to trust you. Help us to always have you in our boat so that when the unexpected storms of life come, we can have peace. Peace in the midst of these storms, knowing you are with us. Amen. Eugene Peterson, he passed away this week. The scripture I read was from The Message. And just to remember the man who rendered Psalm 36 so beautifully and spectacularly as this. He says this: God's love is meteoric, his loyalty astronomic, his purpose titanic, his verdicts oceanic. Yet in his largeness, nothing gets lost. Not a man, not a mouse slips through the crack. May you be the light of Christ this week. And if you'd like to have prayer, please come forward. Be the church this week, everybody.